Hello and welcome back to Parallax Scrolling for web design. Now that we've finished up our HTML, let's get started styling our page. So first we need to create another style sheet link here. So I'm just going to highlight the current link, copy it, paste it on the next line, and now we're going to point to main.css. So let's save that file, and then in our CSS folder we'll create a new file called main.css. And let's go ahead and start with the background, since we already know how to do the background. We did it in the last video. So remember, our empty background div is called stars. So we're going to point to $stars, and then inside the curly brackets for that, we're going to, first of all, give it a background. And we're going to give it a fallback color that's the same color as the background of the image itself, that dark blue color, which has a hex value of 425169. Then we're going to apply the image. So we're going to say URL, and then inside parentheses and inside single quotes, I'm going to say .img/stars, and this is a GIF file, .gif. And we're going to align it top, center, no repeat. I don't want this to repeat. We're just going to put it in the top center. And there we go. So now let's go to the next line. We want this to take up the entire width of the stage. So we're going to say width is 100%. For our height, I'm going to set it really tall. Let's set it to 4,000 pixels. Our position, just like last time, is going to be fixed. We want it to be fixed to the very top of the screen. So we're going to set top equal to 0. And then to make sure that it stays behind our other content, I'm going to give this a z index of 100, and later we'll give higher numbers to our other objects. But for now, let's go ahead and save that, and let's see how that looks. So I'm going to jump into Chrome here and change this to lesson9end.index, and let's get rid of that £Saturn there. And there we go. Now, right now, the background is in front of everything else because we explicitly gave it a z-index of 100. But when we change the z-index for our other objects, we'll put them above that layer. For example, let's go into our content layer now. Let's go back into our CSS file. And let's create another rule for our content div, which has all of our text in it. And we're going to give our text a color of white. So color $FFF. We're going to give it a position of relative. We're also going to give it a margin of 0 auto so that it will be centered within the browser, and a width of 960 pixels. Then, in order to place it above the stars background, we're going to give it a z-index of 300. And we're actually going to put our images in between the content and the stars, so our images are going to be at 200. But this will put the content above the stars background. So now when we save that and refresh our page, we can see our content shows up down there. And it's pushed down quite a bit, but we'll fix all of that later. For now, that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's jump back into TextMate. And let's go ahead and add a rule for our images. So #images. And for the images, it's going to work the same as the background. We're going to set our position to fixed. And it's just going to be scrolling at a different speed than the background. We're also going to put our top equal to 0. We'll set our width here to 100% as well. And then we'll set our z-index here. We're going to put it between the stars background and the content. So we're going to put it at a z-index of 200. So let's save that and refresh our page. And now we're getting a little bit closer. And now that we've set our images to fixed, you'll notice that the text is nudged upwards. So we can see our text is on top of the images, which is on top of the stars background. So we're getting a little bit closer to what we're looking for. So now let's put the main navigation up here at the top. Right now it's still hiding behind everything else. So let's jump back into our code here for our CSS, skip a couple lines, and we'll create some rules for our main nav, which is our navigation item. We'll set the background color to a value of 303D50. I'm going to give it a height of 35 pixels. We're going to set the padding to 0, the margin to 0, And then we're going to fix its position as well, because we want it to always stay at the very top of the browser. Even after we scroll up, we don't want that navigation to disappear. We want it to be fixed at the top of the browser. So we're setting our position to fixed. We'll set our top position to 0 so that it stays right there at the top. And we'll set our width for it to 100% and our Z index. And this is going to be on top of everything else. I'm just going to go ahead and set it to a high value of 1000 so that it will be on top of everything else no matter what. So let's see how that looks. It's going to look a little weird at first, but let's go ahead and save it and refresh our page. And we've got the bar looking exactly like we want it. The reason it looks weird is because we haven't altered the unordered list within it, and each of these list items by default is going to be a block element, so they're all going to be stacked on top of each other and they won't fit within that 35 pixels. So let's go ahead and code our unordered list here, and let's do that here. So pound main nav space UL, so the unordered list inside that main navigation. We're going to set its width to 960 pixels, which is the same width as the content area itself. We're going to set our margin to 0 space auto so that it is centered within that nav bar. I'm going to set the height for this to 25 pixels and the padding top to 10 pixels. So when you add the height to the padding top, you get a height of 35 pixels, which is the same height as the main nav that it's nested inside of. So let's skip a couple lines here. And the next thing I want to do is, instead of having our list items stacked on top of each other, I want them all to float to the left so that they will appear next to each other instead of on top of each other. So we'll point to main nav space UL space LI, and we want each of these items to float to the left. We're going to set our height for each of these list items, and it looks like I accidentally did LA instead of LI. We want each of these list items to be 30 pixels tall. Also, I want each one of them to be 200 pixels wide, and we're also going to take off the extra padding. Remember, by default with a list item, or with a unordered list, there's some padding on the left which makes space for the bullet points, and we want to get rid of that extra padding, and then we want to get rid of the bullet points themselves. So we'll change list style type to none, and then finally I'm going to center align the text within each button. So there we go. So each button is going to be 200 pixels wide, and the text is going to be center aligned within that button. So let's take a look at that. Save it, jump back into our file and refresh. And now our buttons are aligned next to each other appropriately. The only thing we need to do is make them a little more visible, because that blue color and purple color just aren't working. So we're going to point to the anchor tags within that. So we'll skip a couple lines and point to main nav space UL space LI space A. So we're pointing to the anchor tags within those list items, and we're going to give them a color of pound F1 ECB9. I'm also going to make it bold, so we'll set our font weight to bold, and we're going to take away the underline. So we'll set text decoration to none. All right, let's see how that looks. Save it, refresh our page, and now our menu is looking good too. So the last thing I want to do in this video is to put the Earth image in place. So we're going to jump back over to our file. We'll skip a couple lines down here at the bottom. And remember, we put our Earth image inside a div with an ID of Earth. So we'll create a rule for that here. And inside this Earth div, also we want it to be 100 pixels. And then I want it to be centered as well. So we're going to set position to relative. And then on the next line, we'll set our text align to center so that that item will be centered on the stage. And then we'll also set our Z index. I want it to be above everything else except for the main navigation. So I'm going to set this to a Z index of 900, just below that main navigation. So we'll save that, refresh our page, and there we go. Now, obviously things are still cluttered, things are still getting in the way of each other, but we're getting a little bit closer. For now, we'll go ahead and wrap this video up, and in the next video, we'll start positioning everything a little bit better. So with that done, we'll move on with the next video. Thank you for watching.